Hello, everybody. It's Tuesday night. It's 7 o'clock, and we are live. Hello, everybody. It's Tuesday night. It's 7 o'clock, and we are live. Welcome to V-Talks. I'm so glad you're joining us this evening. You know, I just noticed I'm looking behind me and the sun is still shining. So I think this is the first time this has happened since we started the show. So the days are definitely getting longer. So I'm excited about tonight because we're going to talk about the dreaded muffin top. So I don't know about you, but I've gained a little weight around the middle this year. We talk about the COVID-19, but the COVID-19 is also the 19 pounds. And though I haven't gained 19 pounds, I've gained some weight. And I've noticed as I've gotten older that I've gained it around the middle and I can't seem to lose it. And we affectionately refer to it as the muffin top, but I'm not very affectionate towards it at all. So tonight we're gonna speak to someone that has told me we can get rid of it. And he's gonna talk about a lot of interesting topics that I think we all can relate to. And I'm really happy that he's here. He's a chiropractic physician, a functional medicine practitioner, and a certified cellular inflammation and detoxification specialist. I did it. And his name is Dr. Wild, and I'm so excited for you to meet him. He's an awesome guy. He's incredibly interesting. And he's gonna blast the fat off our waist. So let's get him on here. Hi.
Hey, Veronica.
Oh my goodness, there's a little dog.
Yeah, I've gained 8 pounds in the few minutes I was waiting to go on because he just had to be held.
Oh, well, yeah, but that can come off pretty quickly.
As a matter of fact, I'm going to try to get it off right now. So
All right.
This is Ralphie. He's going to say goodbye.
Hi, Ralphie. I'm so grateful that you're here tonight. Thank you so much. We chatted a little bit earlier, and I know you're going to give some really wonderful information to all of us because I think we're all feeling a little pudgy.
Yeah. Yeah, as we discussed, I see this every day in my practice. As you were mentioning, I actually have a kind of a different practice than most doctors of chiropractic do because I blend a couple of different aspects of healing arts that I've learned over the last 30 years. So I am a chiropractic physician. I'm also a functional medicine practitioner. I'm a biohacker, and I run a biohack gym. A lot of people don't know what that word means, but biohacking is using scientific shortcuts to rapidly improve your health and performance. So I have all kinds of cool technology, tips, tools, techniques that help you really get a much faster learning curve for your body. And we're going to talk about some of that stuff tonight so I can help people shake those extra 10, 15, 20 pounds that have been developed over the last year much faster than I thought might be possible.
Okay, well, this is just a whole lot of stuff. So we are going to start, first of all, how did you get into this?
So let's see, where do we begin?
I know, yes, go ahead.
All right. So what I do right now is a combination of where life experience takes you, right? Mm-hmm. So it's very interesting. It's a bit of a sad story, but back in 2001, my wife was originally diagnosed with breast cancer. And it turned out that we'd say it's potential breast cancer because we had the same sample checked out by 3 different labs, and we got 3 different results. Mm-hmm. One said it was, one said it wasn't, and one said maybe. Mm-hmm. So we weren't really sure what to do with that, right? Yeah. So they convinced her at the time to remove the lump that was there that actually had been there for over 10 years. So we were kind of doubtful that it was cancer because usually a lump is going to progress within that time, and that never had. But they removed the lump, and then they also convinced her to do radiation therapy. And unfortunately, one of the potential side effects of radiation is cancer. And that radiation therapy actually created a second cancer called angiosarcoma, which is not breast cancer at all, but it's a cancer of the muscles that make up blood vessel walls. And it can show up anywhere you have a blood vessel, which of course is everywhere, right?
Oh, God.
And very, very sadly, it takes 10 years for that to develop enough that you will actually begin to see it. And it was exactly 10 years later that we started to notice that something wasn't right. And it took a full year before they diagnosed it properly, because no one really wanted to, I think, admit that the radiation had caused it. And then finally that was admitted. Not that it helps, but they said, yeah, unfortunately, that's part of where you sign on the dotted line. You're trying to help one thing that could potentially cause a problem in another area. And sadly, they said that at that point, by the time we had found it, we found it a year before they diagnosed it. They said, you've got 3 months to live, at most 6 months, if there's a miracle, because 90% of the people that discover this will be dead within a year of discovering it. They said about 7% of people will live 2 years. About 3% of people will live 2.5 years. No one lives 3 years. So, as you might imagine, that's not what I wanted to hear. No. And actually, I never let her hear that. So you can imagine, if you get told that, how strong is your psyche to fight anything? I mean, you just want to curl up and give up.
Sure,
that's, that's a really scary thing to be told.
Yeah.
That no one lives past 3 years. What are you supposed to do with that?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So I never actually let her hear those words. And I had side conversations with her doctors to get them to agree to just give us the data and let us make our own decisions about that, right? And I thanked them for their input. And I said, honestly, you're talking from your experience, going the route that you would recommend. Well, that route doesn't sound so good to me, so we're going to try a different route. What do we have to lose, really, right? So I went on to study not cancer per se or cancer treatments, but I went in to further study health, healing, what happens to the body that causes cancer in the first place, rather than treating it. What can we do to stop it, prevent it, reverse the process? Because honestly, I mean, we think we all know somebody who's had cancer. Who hasn't known somebody who had cancer?
Yeah.
How do we treat cancer in this country? 3 ways, right? We cut it out, burn it out, or poison it, right? Surgery, radiation, or chemo. But all those things are simply removing what we can see, the offending thing that's upsetting us, the growth, the tumor. But none of that is changing the process that formed the cancer in the first place. And very little is ever done to teach people about what actually causes cancer. Yeah. And a lot is actually known about that, but not a lot is taught about that.
Sure.
Not as offered in that arena. So I went on to study immune therapy, because what's going to actually defeat the cancer cell? The same thing that defeats a cold, your immune system, right? So that's what I went on to do, was to get deeper into that. And that drove me down the rabbit hole of functional medicine. And I didn't really know what functional medicine was. And a lot of people still don't know what that is. So functional medicine is a system of approaching the body by looking at your body's systems, not your symptoms. So your body's made up of about 15 major systems that govern and control your health and healing and everyday function. And a functional medicine practitioner evaluates you based on those systems, looking for what's out of balance, and then using their tools unique to their perspective to get you back in balance. So I use the tools that I've learned over the years. Your MD could practice functional medicine. Your acupuncturist could practice functional medicine. Your nutritionist. We'd all use different tools in our toolbox to balance your body, but we're going to do that rather than treat your symptoms, right? So isn't that what medicine's supposed to be? Yeah. Right? But it's not what we've allowed it to evolve to be in our country. We've become a symptom treating system. But I think we all know pretty clearly that doesn't actually heal you, right? It helps you feel better. It doesn't really help you heal better. Yeah. So I took that approach. Let's look at what actually makes you heal better. And I didn't know if that was going to stop her cancer. All I really hoped for was to improve the quality and quantity of her life, and maybe there'd be some miracle, right? Yeah. Well, when all was said and done, I put together protocols for her that I started doing, and she started to turn around. We saw her immune system actually triple in its activity based on objective data and lab testing. She went from being bedridden to let's go out to the mall and go shopping, right? Yeah. And that's all I could hope for, you know? Yeah. And sadly, I ultimately did lose her. That was 6 years ago, but she did live 3.5 years, which was one of the record books.
That's
right?
Incredible.
For that kind of cancer. So technically she lived 18 times the amount of time that the top specialists on the East Coast said she would. So I felt that was some form of victory.
Yeah.
You know, I was happy to have 3 years. I would have appreciated 30 more.
Of course.
But, you know, and I've told the story enough that I don't cry every time anymore, which is a good thing. But I think it's important for people to understand why I do what I do and where I came from, because I'm not particularly religious, but I feel I am spiritual. And I think that this is what God actually put me here for, was to learn more about improving people's health at the cellular level, because your body is made of trillions of cells. And ultimately, if your cells aren't well, you aren't well. And that's where it all starts. There's a saying that says, we live and die at the cellular level, and that's ultimately true. Yeah. And so if we can improve the health of our cells, we can sure as hell lose 19 pounds, right. Let alone...
yeah, we're going to segue into that,
right? Let alone reverse processes that lead to chronic disease. So,
well, and that's just it. I mean, what you're saying is, and yes, I know we're here tonight to talk about our bellies, but really, I mean, the kind of work you do, you know, I'm here looking at your website. It's heart disease, stroke, cancer, diabetes, autoimmune dysfunction, Alzheimer's, dementia. You know, I mean, what you're talking about is life-changing stuff if we just shift our mindset.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And this is huge. I mean, this is huge. I mean, I'm very interested in this, and I know a lot of our viewers are too, or they're watching, because, you know, this is much bigger than our belly fat.
It is. And actually, and the reason we're even talking about any of this is the one thing that belly fat and cancer have in common, as well as heart disease and diabetes and Alzheimer's and all that stuff, is there is a common denominator, a middleman in all of those situations, which is cellular inflammation and toxicity that's chronic. And chronic means it's going on for more than 3 months. So not a real long time, right? Right. If you think about it. So we'll talk a little bit about that tonight, and we'll talk about how you can tell if you have that going on and how you can fix it. And that's ultimately what we're after. First and foremost, we want to look good in the mirror, because bikini season's just around the corner.
Dude, it's
right?
really coming. It's coming quick.
I mean, you know, and I'm telling you right now, I'm going to look good in a mankini this season no matter what.
Oh, mankini. Okay? There we go.
I'm going to work on it. And I'm not going to show anyone pictures of that for sure. But in all seriousness, what we do to eradicate that belly fat that didn't go away is the same thing that sets the stage to heal and repair and prevent all those top chronic diseases that people are dying from. Right? Now, of course, there's a lot more to it than just that, but this is where you start. If you don't start here, it doesn't really matter.
Okay, so this is where you start. So let's start.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
So
So fundamentally, as I said, your body's made of trillions of cells. Okay, so we want to get back down to what's going wrong with the cells that's interfering with, in this tonight's discussion, the development of that muffin top that won't go away. Yeah. Right? So you and I spoke a little bit originally about a couple of different issues, and we saw how, wow, this is all tying together. You know, it's connecting the dots. And it's a giant interwoven web. And chronic inflammation, and let's talk about inflammation for a second.
Okay.
Is inflammation bad? No, we need inflammation. Without inflammation, we'd all die, right? So if you get an infection, inflammation is what makes it red and hot and pussy, right? Gross, but why? Right? Because inflammation is the process your immune system uses to bring the chemistry to heal those tissues and kill the bad guys. Okay. right? If I cut my hand, it's going to become inflamed. If I have an infection, it's going to be inflamed. If I have COVID, my lungs are getting inflamed, right? So inflammation is part of the healing process. And that healing process, that's called acute inflammation, which means it's short-term, kills the bug, heals the wound, heals the lungs, and then it's gone. But the problem occurs when that process doesn't stop. The body becomes confused, something throws it off track, and then inflammation remains. Instead of healing you, it starts to harm you. Okay. And that prolonged inflammation or chronic inflammation has a very destructive effect at the cellular level that then causes hormone imbalance, causes systemic inflammation that goes beyond the original source. That whole body inflammation starts to affect the organs, the glands, the brain. And that's how it actually segues into those other chronic diseases that we were talking about, including things like cancer.
Okay. So we have inflammation that is chronic, and we need to not have that. So
correct.
What is step one?
Okay. So the most important tool you have in your armament against cellular inflammation and chronic disease is in everyone's home. Everyone already owns it. As a matter of fact, you probably own a bunch of them. They're called forks. Okay? Because what you put in your mouth plays the largest role. Okay. You cannot out-exercise or out-supplement or out-medicate a bad diet, period. So people say to me all the time, what can I take to help this? I said, you could take the time to stop putting crap in your mouth. Okay. All right? Bottom line. Right?
What's crap?
So, first and foremost.
I mean, let's just get basic here.
Yeah. So first and foremost, I say there's some really basic rules I ask anybody to follow to start reducing inflammation. Right? And one of them freaks everybody out. And that first one is eliminating as much as you can simple carbohydrates, which is specifically grains, from your diet while you're inflamed. I'm not saying forever, but while you're inflamed. And the reason I say that is simple carbohydrates and grains in specific convert very rapidly to sugar in your bloodstream. And I think we all know by now that sugar is not a great thing. Tastes good, but we all know that sugar creates inflammation. Sugar is cancer's favorite food, right? So anytime you're eating sugar or something that converts rapidly to sugar, you're feeding cancer first. Okay. All right. So your cancer cells will gobble that up, and then whatever remains will go to the other cells in your body. And now you need sugar. If we're going to talk about it on a real scientific level, there's only two fuels for your cells: glucose, which is sugar, and ketone bodies, which are fats. Right? And you may have heard the word ketone before because the ketogenic diet is becoming really popular right now because people are using it to lose weight, right? But that's not what the ketogenic diet was designed to do, right? The ketogenic diet was designed to reduce inflammation in your body, rebalance your hormones, and enable your body to heal and repair and normalize itself, right? And just so happens that when you do those things, you start losing weight because the majority of weight that we're carrying is excess sugar we couldn't metabolize and excess toxins that we couldn't neutralize. Okay? And it's also driven by hormone imbalance. And we'll get a little more into this in our conversation, but there are 15 hormones in your body that control all of your fat metabolism. So whether your fat gets burned or stored is determined by 15 hormones. 10 of them live in your body, 5 of them live in your brain. The 5 in your brain we call neurotransmitters. Okay? But they all have to be in proper communication and balance for your body to burn your fat. And of those, there are 6 primary fat burners and 3 primary fat storers. So you got twice as many fat burners as you do storers. So don't you think it would be twice as easy to lose weight than gain it? Wouldn't that be nice? Well, right? But we all know that's not true.
Yeah, it's because it's what we eat.
Right. Yeah. So the problem is if you turn on one fat storer, you turn off all fat burners. So you could be doing a lot of things right and do one thing wrong that really shoots yourself in the foot.
Really?
Yes. And the majority of that is affected by what goes in your mouth. Okay? So getting back to grains. The reason I say grains are so bad is they convert very rapidly to sugar. For example, even 2 slices of organic whole wheat bread, you would think that's good and healthy.
Yeah, because it's
converts,
whole wheat. It's
right?
Yeah.
That converts to more sugar in your bloodstream than a can of Pepsi. All right.
So, are we looking at like carbohydrate counts, or like is that kind of what we're doing, or we're just saying
not necessarily counts, right? Okay. When I talk about counts, because vegetables are carbohydrates, and I want you to eat lots of veggies. Yeah. All right. Okay. I'm not saying carbs are bad. I'm saying certain carbs are worse than others. Okay. And there's another evil that is associated with grains, which is why I pick on grains so much, is your conventionally grown grains are sprayed with pesticides and herbicides, right? And the worst offender is something called glyphosate, which is the active ingredient in Roundup. And you may have heard of that because it made a lot of news in recent years because it had been blamed for many, many years for creating a lot of health disorders, and it finally got proven that it causes cancer. And now Monsanto was the original manufacturer of that. And as soon as that stuff was about to hit the fan, they passed the buck and sold the company to Bayer, right, who makes Bayer aspirin. Yeah. And so now Bayer gets to handle all those lawsuits, all right? But there's a massive onslaught of lawsuits now because we realize that glyphosate causes massive destruction of our body, basically. And the reason it does that, and I'm just going to take a little side note here because there's a lot of people who feel that glyphosate is safe. And in the farming industry, they were taught that for years because they do know that glyphosate does not affect human cells. So therefore, it is safe. It can't hurt a human cell. And that's absolutely true. But they just didn't finish the sentence. It can't hurt human cells, but it kills microorganisms and especially bacteria. Because glyphosate is not only an herbicide and pesticide, it's an antibiotic. Now, we said your body is made up of trillions of cells. I see. Yeah. 90% of the cells in your body, and this freaks a lot of people out too, are microbes. 90% of your body's cells are microbes. 10% are human. So we are a host to an incredible microbial ecology that we live in concert with. One example of that, as we all know, there's a body of microbes that live in our gut that we call our intestinal microbiome, right? Well, we have a microbiome that lives on our skin, a microbiome that lives in our sinus cavity, our mouth, our genitals. We have microbiomes all over our body. And our body is made up of all these microorganisms that feed information to our human cells and tell our brain and our glands what hormones to make and when to make them, what nutrients to extract from our food and how to digest them, how to control our immune function, right? That's all controlled by those microbes, especially the ones in your gut. And what does glyphosate do? Kill them. So it's just like we know we shouldn't take a lot of antibiotics, right? Because it's bad. Bad for our gut, bad for our immune systems. Well, glyphosate is a hidden antibiotic. And it's sprayed on every grain you're being fed, on beans and berries and white potatoes and sweet potatoes. They're trying to kill us. All in the name of $1. Right? Sadly. That's really what's true. Right? So glyphosate is sprayed on all the grains. So grains are a double whammy. They break down to sugar, which is inflammatory, and you're killing your microbiome, which is controlling your immune system and your hormone systems. All right? So rule number 1, no matter what kind of diet you like to follow, a keto diet, a paleo diet, Mediterranean diet, vegetarian, vegan, I don't care. Rule number 1, avoid grains if you have current inflammation in your body. And we'll talk a little bit later about how do you know if you have current inflammation, right? And you and I talked about that, and there's very simple testing you can do that's extremely effective, extremely affordable, that will tell you right away what your inflammation levels are, how it's affecting your cells. And this, to me, is probably the single most important test that anyone can take relative to their health. It even tells you, and we didn't talk about this yet, how susceptible you are to COVID. Meaning, if this test comes out at a certain level, you're much more likely to have a severe case or even die versus a mild case. Oh, wow. And again, it comes down to cellular health. If your cells are inflamed and unhealthy, they can't hear your immune system properly. They can't hear any of your other hormones properly. They can't get nutrients in and they can't get waste out as well as they should. So if that's the case, you're going to succumb more easily to anything. The disease du jour happens to be COVID, right? But these are also the people who are going to succumb to the flu. These are also people who are going to succumb to other chronic diseases, die more easily from diabetes, die more easily from cardiovascular disease. Well, you can see what your risk level is. And most importantly, that same test tells me how to tell you how to correct it in as little as 3 months. So you can literally turn your life and health around and dramatically improve your odds of surviving even something like COVID just by fixing your cells. Okay, and then we can, of course, go well beyond that. But that's step number 1.
I know. I love this because we're not putting a Band-Aid on anything. We're actually getting down to the prevention aspect of it.
Right.
You know,
right.
And that's what we want.
Yeah.
Like, we want to prevent disease, you know. We don't want to have it and then go,
right.
let's try and cure it because we
Exactly.
might not be able to.
Because unfortunately, and as you know, we've accepted the Band-Aid approach. We've allowed it. And it's really, it's a very weak way to try to enhance the health of the body, you know. And you've probably heard this analogy before, but, you know, popping a pill to cover up a symptom and then saying, I'm okay, is much like taking your car to a mechanic because the engine is about to blow up and the engine light's on. The mechanic goes, that's okay, I'm going to put a little spot of spray paint on that light so it doesn't bother you anymore. Okay? Yeah. That makes no sense at all, but that's what we're doing when we're covering up our symptoms and not really doing anything to help us heal, right? Yeah. And my ultimate goal is not to help you feel well, but it's to help you heal well. And when you heal well, you happen to feel well too. So that's not a bad thing, right?
So we start with grain.
Start with grains. Next thing, number 2, is if you're going to consume meat and dairy, if you're someone who eats those things, they must be organic. And there's a big difference between conventionally raised animals and organically raised animals. And whatever that animal ate is ultimately what you're eating. Sure. What does a conventionally raised cow eat? Grains. Of course. What does an organic pasture cow eat? Grass. Right? Cows were not meant to eat grains. We feed them grains. We want to fatten them up. So if grains fatten up cows, what do grains do to you? Now, another thing they do for cows is they shoot them up with antibiotics, right?
Yeah.
Why do they do that? Right. Not just for disease, but because they want to destroy that cow's microbiome in their gut. Why? Destroy your microbiome and you get fatter. They want fat cows. Fat cows give you more to sell, right? So when you're ingesting that commercially raised, antibiotic, hormone-driven cow fed on grains sprayed with glyphosate, what do you think is going to happen to you? Right? And so the dairy is just taking that from the cow and concentrating it, right? So I personally am a meat eater, right? And I know you're not, right? So, you know, right? But I see the value in certain nutrients that come from meat. Yeah. And, you know, I love animals, but I'm not so philosophically strong that I don't mind eating some of them. Sorry. Right? Okay.
My husband loves a good steak.
Right.
Yeah. Don't worry about it.
So what's a good steak?
A grass-fed.
Right. Yeah. Right. So I crack up when I go to a high-end steakhouse and they show me the finest steak on the menu is their grain-fed steak, and I look at them and go, "You're kidding me." Right?
They market it that way.
Right. I said that is the worst possible thing you could try to give me.
Right.
All right. So when you are eating a steak, for example, if it's a conventionally raised steak or even a piece of chicken or anything like that, the fat on that is where all the hormones, antibiotics, pesticides, and herbicides and toxins get stored. So if you're eating conventional meat and you don't have any other choice, you want the leanest cut possible and to trim off all of that fat. Now on the other side, if you're eating an organic animal, you want as much of the fat as possible. That's where all the vitamins and minerals are stored. Okay. So if you're having an organic steak, you want it as marbled as possible, which also makes it taste the best. All right. So a big difference. Rule number 1, no grains. Rule number 2, if you're eating meat and dairy, it must be organic. Rule number 3 are fats.
Yeah.
So, and you were just mentioning to me earlier before we came on that you've gone on a ketogenic diet for a while and you've seen fantastic results. And you know if you're doing a keto diet properly, that means the vast majority of your calories are coming from fats, but they have to be healthy fats, right? We can't just load up on, crappy butter and bacon and think we're going to get healthier. No, that's not how it works, right? So it's not a license to just go eat a can of lard. Okay.
It's not, Atkins, I think, was that way. Remember the Atkins
So actually,
diet?
right, so Dr. Atkins actually was the first ketogenic diet. And where things went wrong is people read the headline and didn't read the story, right?
I remember
so,
it's like people were just eating like bacon
right.
and like canned.
Right. You mean I can eat just meat and fat? Awesome.
Pepperoni. Yeah, right. I remember
right?
seeing it. Yeah.
So unfortunately, Dr. Atkins was on the right track.
Yeah.
Right? But people took it out of context.
Sure.
And there were some things that I didn't agree with what he said. But for the most part, he actually had a good idea, which was watch out for those simple carbohydrates, watch out for those grains. Right? He was one of the first people to talk about that.
Sure.
Real interesting side note, because it just cracks me up, going back to grains. What's the most favorite thing people like to eat in the morning that's made out of grains, and you put it in a bowl and you fill it with milk?
I know, cereals.
Cereal, right?
Devil.
So what is one of the largest companies that makes cereal? Kellogg's, right? Yeah. Well, who's Kellogg? Dr. Kellogg started Kellogg's cereal. Okay? Kellogg's cereal started back in the 50s when the predominant thought process was that the youth of today are too preoccupied with sex, right? So we want to cut down the sex drive. And Dr. Kellogg came up with a brilliant idea. What's the best way to cut down sex drive? Screw with people's hormones. What's the best way to screw with your hormones? Feed them lots of grains because it screws up hormones. Okay? Yep. And so he created Kellogg's cereals for that purpose.
This is insanity.
Right? Now, talk about a brilliant marketer. So then people started to actually lose their sex drive. Okay? But a side effect of that was they started gaining weight because it screws with your hormones. Sure. So then Dr. Kellogg's opened Kellogg's Fat Farms, where your first rule was no cereal. Right? Oh, yeah, look up this history. It's astounding to me.
I was actually just talking to, speaking of marketing and breakfast, I was just talking to a friend yesterday, and we were laughing because, and we'll get into this later, I know, but we were just talking about how we've been told that breakfast is the most important meal of the day.
Right.
And it's just loaded with carbs and, even Quaker oatmeal, like, oh yeah, eat Quaker because that'll stick with you longer.
Right.
I've never thought oatmeal stuck with me. Like I was just as hungry with that than I was with cornflakes, but it's just the marketing aspect, and pancakes, come on, but this is what we were told. And this is the bill of goods we've been sold our whole life. And we just, that repetition, that marketing, we just, so we're spouting that off. Oh yeah.
It's very effective marketing, right?
Meal of the day, right?
Yeah. And to me, that is the most backwards thinking you could possibly have. And breakfast is not the most important meal of the day by any means. As a matter of fact, I only eat breakfast one day a week.
Yeah.
I eat breakfast on Sundays, and I follow a process of intermittent fasting. And intermittent fasting means that,
right.
I think you did. Yeah, you did a good job. All right.
I know, I didn't have my glasses on. Intermittent. So, yeah, okay.
Yeah, intermittent fasting means that you only eat within a certain window in the day. And ideally, the window should be about 7 hours. So that means for 17 hours, you're not eating, right? So we as Americans particularly have a big problem in our country. We eat too much and we eat too often. And the often is more important than the much. So I eat 2 meals a day, but I eat a lot of meals. A lot of food at those meals. Yeah. And my friends look at me and go, I don't understand it. How do you stay so lean? You're always going back for second and thirds, right? So it's not really about calories and quantity as much as it's about quality, right? I can eat 500 calories of crap and gain weight, or 5,000 calories of something that's really healthy and nutritious and not gain weight. It's all about what triggers those hormones.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's not so much the calorie count. And of course, that plays a role. You can't eat 20,000 calories a day and expect that it's got to go somewhere, right? You've got to metabolize it. So that plays a role, but not as much as you think it does. So intermittent fasting means that you're giving your body a break from eating. And there's two main energy draws for our body that are greater than anything else. Number one is immune function, and number two is digestion. So the majority of our energy is going to those two places every day, all right? And the digestive system and the immune system have something very important in common. They both use something called enzymes. So enzymes, you might be aware, you have enzymes in your saliva, you have enzymes in your stomach, your pancreas makes certain enzymes, right? Your gallbladder holds some, your liver makes certain enzymes. And what these enzymes do is they break down your food from large components to small components that can be absorbed and digested, right? But our enzymes do the same thing to bad guys that don't belong there. We digest bacteria and break it down. We digest parasites and break them down. So the enzymes are used both by the digestive system and the immune system. So the same enzymes go both ways, okay? So if you're always eating, and you're eating frequently and lots of small meals, then the enzymes are always being called away to digest, and not enough to protect within the immune system. So now bacteria and parasites have an easier time getting in and affecting your cells because the enzymes got diverted. Okay? So one of the really important things for a healthy body is having a really good enzyme level. And in organic food often contains its own enzymes to help you break it down. When we have commercially raised food, it often does not. And when we do things like microwave our food and irradiate our food, that destroys a lot of the enzymes.
Really?
Just cooking our food can destroy some enzymes. So the more the food's in a raw state, So the more the food is in a raw state, the less processed it is, the more nutrients you get out of it, and the more enzymes are bioavailable to your body. The more you process it and cook it, the more you're destroying certain nutrients and destroying certain enzymes. So you don't get to break it down as well. Okay? So we should have a mixture of that because actually cooking breaks down certain bonds and releases certain nutrients too. So it's a good idea to have a mixture, right? So when I have my veggies, I like some raw broccoli and some cooked broccoli, some roasted broccoli, right? So you get benefit from both with that. So with intermittent fasting, we're giving our body a break and leaving a certain time period for our body to focus on immune system, breaking down old tissue that doesn't belong so new cells can come in, right? So if we give more time to that, we have better, healthier cell turnover and a stronger immune response. And we notice in study after study after study that the more fasting we do, the healthier we are. And a lot of people hear fasting and freak out. I can't not eat, I have to eat. You haven't tried, right? You really haven't tried. So, because they have been so addicted to food and sugar particularly that if they miss a meal, they suddenly get shaky, they get a headache, they feel fatigue because they're so sugar addicted. And you have to flip that switch. If you don't ever flip that switch, you're in a heap of trouble. Okay?
So regarding that, I've been doing keto for about a month.
Right.
And I'm really not very hungry anymore.
Right.
Because I don't have the sugar.
Right.
So, I even sometimes I'm like, gosh, I'm not even hungry. I should be hungry right now.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm not because I'm just not. So
and the reason that happens, is sugar burns like wood. It's a fast burn, a flash burn, right? But what happens when you burn wood? It generates a lot of smoke. Mm-hmm. And if there's a house fire, what usually causes the predominance of the damage? Not the fire, the smoke.
Smoke damage, yeah.
Okay? So when you're burning simple carbohydrates, it burns like wood and it generates a lot of internal smoke. Okay? The internal smoke is called free radicals.
Yeah.
And you may have heard that term before because free radicals, we know, create damage at the cellular level. And that's a whole other topic we can get into that we probably shouldn't start now. But the reason we talk about the benefit of antioxidants is they're actually helping to neutralize those free radicals. So antioxidants means they stop oxidation. The process of burning something is oxidation. So when you're burning that firewood in the fire pit, that's oxidation. That creates smoke. Well, in our body, free radicals are the byproduct of oxidation, and it's breaking our cells down, right? And when that happens, we need antioxidants to repair it, which is why antioxidants are good for us. And that comes from our fruits and veggies and things like that, right? And we know vitamin C, vitamin E have antioxidant properties. This is one of the reasons why they're so beneficial to us, is because they repair that damage. So when we burn ketones, which are fats, instead of carbohydrates, ketones burn like natural gas, clean and never any smoke, right? And so it's a much more efficient fuel for our body. As a matter of fact, our brain loves it and thrives on it. So what people tell me all the time is when they start going more into a ketogenic diet, not only do they have more energy, but they can think more clearly than ever before. They sleep more soundly, right? And one of the nice side benefits of that is that activates all those fat burners we talked about. And so you start to burn off your fat because the fat is where the ketones are, right? So if you don't provide the wood for the fuel, you're going to have to turn on the gas stove, right? And it's not easy to turn the gas stove. You're sitting out back around the fire pit. It's a whole lot easier to throw a log on the fire than get off your fat butt, go in the house, and turn on the stove, right? So it actually takes a lot more energy for your body to burn ketones. So if you present it with another log on the fuel, it's going to go for that every time. Even though it creates damage, your body strives towards energy conservation because it needs energy for digestion and immune function. I'm going to get my hand back in here. Here we are, right? Digestion and immune function. So it's going to conserve energy for that purpose as much as it can. So even though in the long run it's damaging, it's still going to burn that wood first if you present it. So if you intermittent fast and don't present anything, then it has to burn that fat. It has to go to those ketones. So biohack number 1, intermittent fast, which means skip breakfast or skip dinner. I don't care which. Just eat within a 7-hour window. Now, if you're able to, a lot of people are working from home nowadays, so if you're able to, make it brunch and dunch, dinner, lunch, right? Right? So have your breakfast around 10 or 11, have your dinner 7 hours later, right? Around 5 or 6, and don't eat beyond that. You can drink as much water as you want, as much tea as you want. Don't put sugar in it. No. Okay? But have herbal tea, have water. You can even have black organic coffee. Don't put any sweetener in it. Or you could put stevia in it, which does not affect these insulin levels or cause a change in your fasting. So you can use stevia. One little side note from that, if you have diabetes, your body has become not only sugar sensitive, it has become sweet sensitive. And even stevia can create a problem for you. But that's another topic too. A whole other, we can spend an hour on that.
The following month.
Right. Won't go to that.
We have a whole year worth here. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
But you'll learn that I very easily get diarrhea of the mouth, and it's hard to shut me up. So if any time
this is important though. Like these are things that we're learning. Like I'm just glued to what you're saying, so I know other people are too. Like
I know we're covering a lot of topics that people may not be familiar with, so I try to use analogies to put in terms of something you understand, because it's very difficult to understand something new if you don't have a reference point, right? So it's always in context of something else. So anytime I try to talk to a patient, I try to always do that because it makes easier on me and easier on them to get it. So we want to burn clean fuel, right? Yeah. So intermittent fasting encourages that. So then when we do eat, it's ideal not to go back to burning a lot of fuel in the form of wood. It's ideal to go back and burn the fuel in the form of healthy fat and healthy protein. Now, protein ultimately breaks down to glucose as well. So again, we said there's 2 fuels your cell eats, glucose and ketones. Glucose is a form of sugar. Ketones are fats. Fat comes from fat. Glucose comes from carbohydrates and proteins. Okay? So you can even get fat by eating too much protein. All right? And more than your body can metabolize.
So I was always told when I was younger that everything needs to be low fat or you'll get fat.
Right.
So
Yeah.
tell us, debunk that myth.
So that was one of the worst things that ever got perpetuated, right? Just like remember we were told that margarine was healthier than butter,
Oh, yeah.
right? I think we figured out that wasn't true,
Right.
right? Pretty much anytime we try to fool Mother Nature, we screw up bad,
Yeah.
right? So right now they're telling you canola oil is a healthy fat. That's today's version of margarine, okay? So canola is not a healthy oil. It's a genetically modified, man-made version of rapeseed oil that was started in Canada. So canola stands for Canadian oil, right? Now, what really cracks me up is when I see labels that say organic canola. How is something genetically modified organic? It's not. That's a marketing lie. Okay? And the reason they're able to say that is they're even starting to change what the term organic means.
Well, it's like the ingredients, some of the ingredients in them are organic,
Right.
but
Right.
then the other stuff is not.
Exactly.
So you can say like made with organic ingredients means that there are some ingredients in there that are organic.
Exactly. I had this exact conversation with my mom today.
Yeah.
Right? Because
all natural.
Right. And another little tidbit of information. If you look on a package, if it says organic on the front, that means that it has to be 75% to 100% organic. If it says it on the side, up to 50%. If it says it on the back, only 25%.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's just
Right?
wrong. It's just wrong on so many levels.
It is. And again, it's all marketing. It's all lobbying.
Yeah.
The sad thing is that our food industry cares nothing about our health, and our health industry cares nothing about our food. Okay? So that's a serious disconnect.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
Okay. So where were we?
Low fat, low fat
right.
milk.
Okay, so low fat, no fat.
Yeah, let's do low fat milk.
Right.
Tell me about
So we used
that.
to think that fat that you ingested became fat in your bloodstream, that became fat that clogged your arteries, that became a stroke or a heart attack.
Yes.
Right? And that came from some really bad science about 50 years ago. All right? Where there was a particular researcher at the time who was trying to make a name for himself, had not had a lot of things published that were not going his way, and he was put in charge of trying to make a correlation between cholesterol and heart disease, cardiovascular disease, and stroke, right? And he, as you may be aware, you can skew statistics. So he gathered all his data that showed the correlation between people eating a high-fat diet with the amount of cholesterol it built up in their arteries, with resultant death due to heart attack and stroke. And the data was really mixed. There were some countries that ate a ton of that and had no heart disease.
Right.
Other countries that ate a little and had lots of heart disease. So he conveniently took out the countries that didn't meet his criteria and only reported on those countries that showed a high correlation between fat and the diet.
Yeah.
But again, that's just one variable.
Sure.
And that's talking about correlation, not causation. So just because we see that there doesn't mean that's the cause. What he didn't look at was, and let me throw another analogy at you. So right away, they then made the determination that fat in our arteries, which is primarily cholesterol, was found every time someone had heart disease or stroke. So therefore, that must be the cause because it's oxidizing, right? It's hardening, and it's breaking off, and it's leading to clots and heart attacks and strokes, which it can, right? That's very real. So they said, all right, and all these autopsies and all these studies, we're seeing that every time we see this, most of the time that someone's dying from heart disease or stroke, we're seeing cholesterol in their arteries. Therefore, cholesterol must be the enemy. Cholesterol is causing it. Well, the reality is that cholesterol is one of your body's number one antioxidants and one of your body's number one anti-inflammatories. And so when your blood vessels are inflamed and in danger of tearing, cholesterol gets called in to coat that and fill in the potholes and cracks to prevent it from rupturing. Okay? So cholesterol is your sandbag to put the fire out.
Yeah.
Okay? But when we looked at the microscope, we saw that cholesterol, so we assumed that was the problem. So the analogy I use is you're driving down the street and you see a house on fire. Horrific. But you see firemen there putting it out. You drive a little bit further and there's another house on fire. And the firemen there putting it out. And you get to the third house and you see that house on fire and the firemen there putting it out. Oh my God, firemen are causing fires. Every fire I see, there's firemen there. Okay? So yes, the firemen are there for a reason. The cholesterol is there for a reason. And that is to actually be an anti-inflammatory. But if we don't change the real trigger to inflammation to our blood vessels, another layer comes, and another layer comes, and another layer comes. And eventually you do build up enough to block that artery. So that is a problem. But the cholesterol is not the problem, the inflammation is. And what did we just learn causes inflammation? Sugar, simple carbohydrates, grains. What were people who were eating high cholesterol, fatty burgers, what were they eating them on?
I know. Bread,
a bun.
Yeah, bun.
What were they having on the side? Deep fried French fries, right? And we talk about sugar causing inflammation in your cells. The number 2 biggest cause of inflammation in your cells from your diet is trans fats, hydrogenated and partially hydrogenated oils. Yeah. French fries, great example. Okay? So think about your cells. Every cell in your body has an outer skin on it, if you can see my arm here, it has pores in it, right? And that's called the external cell membrane. And nutrients have to get in, waste has to get out. It's like a screen window, right? That I want air to flow in and out, but I don't want bugs to get in and out, right? So the pores are small enough on the cell membrane to let nutrients in and waste out, but to block bacteria, viruses, and toxins, parasites. That's what we want. So we have to have open, free flow through those pores. Now, picture that screen window and dip that screen in a French fry vat and pull it back out. What happens to the holes? Right? They're clogged. And if you hold it up in the air for about 5 minutes, it starts to harden. Right? So the same thing happens to your cell membranes when you eat French fries or other trans fats, other hydrogenated and partially hydrogenated oils. And that's another place where the FDA has allowed the food industry to lie, is we'll see on the package, it says 0 grams trans fats. Flip it over and read the actual label. If you see the word hydrogenated or partially hydrogenated, those are trans fats, regardless of what it says, because they're allowed to have up to 0.5 gram per serving and say 0. So think about that. When you're eating that bag of potato chips, is it ever 1 serving? No, right? It's 2, 4 servings. Back. So now consuming 1 to 2 to 3 grams of trans fats, that's extremely damaging. That is leading to a heart attack. That is leading to cancer.
Wow.
Okay? So these are the lies that are allowed because we have great lobbying industries. We have money talks, right? So the food industry does not care about your health. The food industry cares about a buck.
What is your position on the actual potato?
So the potato itself is not evil unless it was sprayed with glyphosate and grown conventionally with pesticides and herbicides, right? But in of itself, a potato is not evil. And in of itself, a potato won't necessarily cause you to be fat. Yes, it does break down to simple sugars more easily. And a sweet potato, even though it's sweeter, has so much more fiber. The fiber offsets the sugar content or carb content. And so it's a better balance, right? So if you're going to choose one over the other and both are equal in terms of both being organic, I would go sweet potato, right? Yeah. But I wouldn't go sweet potato fries that have been fried.
Right.
I would go baked sweet potato. I would put the sweet potato fries, cut up a sweet potato and create fries and put them in my air fryer with no oil and crisp them.
Yeah,
right?
So air
crisp them.
Are good.
Yeah, just don't put oil on them.
Correct.
Right? So it crisps them and it seems like a French fry. It's actually a French roast, really.
Sure.
Or a French bake or whatever you want to call it, right? So that's a healthier way to say not that you can't eat these foods, just prepare them properly.
Sure.
Right? Now, that being said, if your cell membranes became inflamed, and let's say those membranes were the membranes in your gut cells, okay? And they became so inflamed that the pores got damaged. And they got so damaged that they're supposed to be super tight together, but when they get inflamed, they start pulling apart. And when they pull apart, now bacteria, viruses, pathogens can drip through that open hole. Not only that, here comes a food particle that's being digested. And the junction between those cells is supposed to be so tight that's a tiny little hole, only big enough to allow a digested itty-bitty food particle as big as my fingernail to get through. But now that hole has gotten bigger because it's inflamed and damaged. And it's been affected by glyphosate, right? And now bacteria, viruses, and a full food particle as big as my full pinky drops through that hole. Now we have a problem. We call that leaky gut. Right? Because your gut has become leaky and food molecules and bacteria and parasites, toxins get to drop through. Now, right on the other side of those cells is where your immune system lives. 70% of your immune system lives right underneath those cells inside your gut because that's where most things are getting in. Where are most bad guys getting in? Through the big holes we have. So it goes through your digestive system. So our body puts 70% of our soldiers, called white blood cells, there in our intestinal lining. It's called the gastric-associated lymphoid tissue, or GALT. And that's a layer within your intestines that protects your body from bad guys. And your digestive system right there is one cell thick. That's your defense, one cell. And if these bad guys get past it, or if undigested food that's as big as my finger instead of as big as my fingernail gets through it, the white blood cells get confused because that finger looks just like this guy, which is a parasite or a bacteria. So when that gets through, our white blood cells attack. When our white blood cells attack, it creates more inflammation and damage to our gut lining. So we start getting this cycle that goes on. And initially, the white blood cells think it's a bacteria, so they destroy it. And then they go, oh, you're just broccoli. All right, I'll let you pass. But they've already gone through the inflammatory process. Now, this funny thing happens. We don't do anything to fix those holes in our gut. We still live in an inflammatory world. We're still ingesting inflammatory foods and toxins, antibiotics, and ibuprofen, and alcohol, and high stress hormones like cortisol. And all these things are driving more and more inflammation. More and more food comes through, and we do a funny thing. We keep eating. So we think we're doing the best thing in the world. We're eating organic broccoli, but that organic broccoli is dropping through that hole. Your immune system becomes angry with it. We call that food sensitivity. And then if it keeps happening, the immune system is going to trigger your body to attack that molecule of food wherever it ends up. And there's an old saying, you are what you eat. Right? So the food molecule gets through, eventually becomes your cell membrane. Now your immune system attacks it in your gut and wherever else it goes. So your immune system starts attacking your own cell membranes. We call that autoimmunity. Sure. Your body's attacking your own cells when it shouldn't, because it's been sensitized that that molecule is the enemy when it really wasn't. Right? Now, when you develop autoimmunity, you can be sensitive to a lot of foods, like potatoes. So I can make a blanket statement and say potatoes aren't evil, but they may be evil for you, right? Or for you, because your body is now sensitive to it. And that we determine by doing specialized testing that measures your immune reaction against those foods. Okay? So I know we're coming up on an hour, and I want to try to wrap things up that people came here for, because we went off on a lot of tangents, and this really is a 5-hour conversation if we're really going to do it right.
So I know they're like, when are we going to talk about my belly fat?
Okay,
but we're going there.
We are.
Right?
We are. Because intermittent fasting, if we covered nothing else, that's the number one thing you could do to help fix your belly fat. Stop eating as often. Okay? And follow those rules I gave you. No grains, only organic dairy and meat, and healthy fats. We said canola was an unhealthy fat. What's another unhealthy fat? Vegetable oil. Yeah. Soybean oil. Okay? Not healthy. All right? Seed oils, sunflower oil, safflower oil, not great. Now, sunflower oil can be a certain version called high oleic. That's okay. But regular, not so much.
What is oleic?
So it means that it's been manufactured in such a way that the molecular structure is a little bit different, and it's metabolized differently. Okay? So healthy oils, coconut oil, avocado oil, extra virgin olive oil, nut oils like almond oil or macadamia oil. Okay? These are all very good healthy oils. Grapeseed oil is another good one. All right? And when you're cooking, it's very important that even what we call these healthy oils are not all created equal. Some oxidize very quickly, when they get heated. And we talked about oxidation being like the smoke burning. So when we heat that oil, it generates smoke. So it has what we call a low smoke point, which means it actually gets too hot too fast, and it changes the molecular structure. So you start with a healthy oil and you turn it into a bad oil. Now, the number one oil that does that is olive oil. So people all the time say, I only cook with olive oil. And I say, not good. So olive oil, you should not cook with it because there's a low smoke point. And there's a threshold you pass where you heat it too much and it becomes oxidized and rancid and creates this very same free radical damage at your cell membranes that not only will lead to more fat because it screws up your hormones, but it'll lead to those chronic diseases we talk about. All right? So I say use olive oil as a drizzle at the end for flavor or in your salad dressing. But the oils that have a very high smoke point that are really hard to burn are coconut and avocado. Okay? Those are great oils. And you can also use organic pasture-raised butter. One of the best things you could use.
And
right?
We have to be careful with the oils, right? Because I've seen in the grocery store that some oils are not created equal, and they look like it'll say 100% avocado oil, but then you realize that the avocado oil is 100% avocado oil, but they've added other oils with it.
Just like we said before, right? Organic, made with organic. You know, so yeah, you really do have to read your labels, right?
Yes.
Actually flip it over because it says olive oil. And you flip it over and it's 75% soybean oil, big bad no-no, and 25% olive oil.
Yeah.
Right? Always read your labels.
Yes.
Yeah. And one last tip I'll give for faster weight loss by reading your labels. When we look at a label, the label breaks down stuff for us, the amount of sugar, the amount of carbohydrates, the amount of fat, fiber, right? So there's a very easy ratio you can follow to determine if something's going to be fattening or not. And that is the fiber to carbohydrate ratio. So let's just use an example. It says that it has 10 grams of carbs, but we look below that and it says that of those 10 grams of carbs, there are 5 grams of fiber. That's going to be a great product because there's so much fiber, it offsets the amount of carbs. And the ratio we're looking for is 4 to 1. You want to have 1 gram of fiber for every 4 grams of carbs.
Okay.
Right? So if it has 1 gram of fiber and 3 grams of carbs, fantastic. 1 gram of fiber and 5 grams of carbs, that's going to start to be fattening. 1 gram of fiber and 10 grams of carbs, very fattening. So then just extrapolate that out.
Like
2 grams of fiber, right?
Pecans, they have a lot of fiber.
Right.
So
Okay.
I because I'm on this thing now, right? So I'm
Right.
looking, I'm like, oh, 4 grams of carbs, that's a lot. But wait, there's 3 grams of fiber.
Right, and that's why we kind of see on a lot of labels we talk about net carbs, right?
Net
Because it's
carbs.
saying, hey, the fiber offsets that, so not all carbs are created equal in that food,
What
right?
about some people talk about there's sugar and there's sugar alcohols and like what about
Yeah.
all that?
So sugar alcohols are a derivation from sugar, and those are created things called polyols like erythritol,
Okay.
sorbitol, right? Xylitol. All the alls are sugar alcohols, and I'm not a big fan of sugar alcohols because they actually create brain cell death.
Oh.
Okay, so they're what we call excitotoxins,
Okay.
which means that like artificial colors and artificial flavors, they speed up the neurons' synaptic connections. So the neurons in your brain, the cells meet, and they actually have a little gap between them called a synapse. And they have a fluid that goes from one to the other called a neurotransmitter. And there's a little electrical impulse that bridges and goes through that fluid for one cell to talk to the other. Well, things like the polyols, the sugar alcohols, artificial colors, artificial flavors, they cause that to happen so fast and excite it so much that it eventually burns out and dies. So it's called an excitotoxin. So if you had that stuff every now and then, not a big deal. But if you say, hey, that's going to be my everyday go-to. I'm going to drink that sports drink that's made with erythritol because it's not sugar. Well, if you're having it every day, you're killing brain cells. All right, and it's another place you have to watch out. Like we talk about stevia being okay, but read your labels, flip it over, because almost everyone I see in the store is stevia with erythritol,
Yeah, sure.
right? Or stevia with dextrose. Dextrose is sugar. You're kind of just defeating the purpose right there.
Well, it's interesting. I was trying to get off all artificial sweeteners at one point,
Mhm.
and agave was like everyone's agave, and
Right,
I, I mean, actually, that's probably when I started gaining weight. Is when I started using agave, and I
right.
thought I was doing a good thing.
Sure. And the difference there is agave is still sugar, but there's
Yeah,
something called the glycemic index,
yeah.
right? And the glycemic load. So the glycemic index is how much sugar does this substance contain. The glycemic load is how fast does it get broken down and metabolized by your body, right? And it can have a lot of sugar, but if it's very slowly metabolized because it's mixed with a lot of fiber, then the load is not so bad.
Okay.
But if it's a simple sugar, boom, the load is very high. That's going to cause a bigger problem. And it's because it's causing a change in your hormone balance. Your insulin, cortisol, which is a stress hormone, cortisol stores belly fat, okay? And if insulin spikes, cortisol spikes. So if you eat something that's going to convert rapidly to sugar, insulin goes up and so does cortisol, all right? And if cortisol goes up, it's eventually going to store the excess sugar that your cells can't absorb in the form of belly fat. And let me wrap up for this evening by just talking about that just a little bit more for a bit.
Yeah.
And with you,
So
I would like to come back and continue this conversation because
yeah.
what I really wanted to get into tonight, which we never even touched on,
It's
but
because there's such a process to
right,
get there. Like, why?
right.
Right?
So
Yeah.
again, I think it helps to understand the higher level if you understand the bottom, the foundation. So we're
Yeah.
going through A plus B so I can get you to G.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know. Yeah.
Or in this case, F for fat. Okay.
Uh-huh.
So let's talk about those hormones for a second.
Sure.
So we know our cortisol is a fat storing hormone, right? And we've seen a glut of products on the market geared towards trying to reduce cortisol, right, in order to reduce belly fat. So why is cortisol storing belly fat? So cortisol is a stress hormone. Cortisol plays many different roles in your body. Your body makes cortisone out of cortisol because cortisone, if you get a cortisone shot, why? It's an anti-inflammatory. So when you're inflamed, your body makes cortisol. It's a stress response because part of that's going to be cortisone to start to calm that. But the cortisol plays lots of other roles, and part of it is to balance other hormones that are out of whack. Well, when you eat sugar, your insulin spikes up. Insulin spikes up because insulin is the hormone that tells the cells, open the door and let some glucose in for fuel, right? So the problem we have with diabetes is that door doesn't open very easily. And so initially, the insulin's coming in, but the cell can't hear it really well. The cell becomes deaf to that insulin. So it becomes what we call insulin resistant, right? It can't hear it. So then the pancreas starts making more and making more. It says, oh, if you can't hear me, let me yell louder. So it keeps making more and more. Eventually the pancreas burns out, and we call that diabetes. Okay? So it starts with this insulin resistance where the cell can't hear it. Now, insulin is a hormone, and our body makes over 600 different hormones. Hormones are the chemical messengers of the body. All right? So insulin's one of them. There are hormones that control all of your fat metabolism, hormones that control all of your immune function, hormones that control all of your blood pressure, all related to that, right? So another thing cortisol does is regulate blood pressure, along with other hormones from your adrenal glands and something called mineral corticoids. That's going to help to regulate your mineral flow, which addresses your blood pressure. It's all a stress response. So if a tiger is chasing you, do you want your blood pressure to bottom out or go up? You want it to go up, right? Fight or flight. If it bottoms out and you go, I'm going to faint, well, bye-bye.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So cortisol helps to raise that along with something called adrenaline, right? So it makes that heart rate go up and the blood pressure go up, so it shunts blood to your arms and legs so you can have fight or flight, okay? So that's a good thing. That's an acute response, right? Just like we said, acute inflammation is a good thing. What happens when that stress response becomes chronic, like a year of being afraid that a virus is going to kill you, a year of hearing on the TV every day over and over and over about how many people are dying, how you're going to die, how you better stop breathing, you better stop talking, right? So you get completely freaked out. It's embedded in our psyche, just like that great marketing that the food industry does.
Yeah.
We got marketed to through the news media. A lot of fear mongering. It raises the rates, right? The ratings. Everyone's going to tune in because they want to see what's happening next, right?
And
it's stress. So as that cortisol stays elevated, it now starts causing destruction. And what elevated cortisol does is one thing it does is create inflammation of your cell membranes. And when cell membranes become inflamed, they become resistant to hormones. So every cell membrane has a little antenna that stick out of it. They're listening for the hormone signal, listening for insulin to say, open up and let the sugar in. But if that cell membrane's inflamed, that antenna gets bent. And it can't hear that insulin, so it becomes resistant. So one of the causes of diabetes is cell inflammation. Those same hormones are telling the body to burn fat. So one of the causes of belly fat is cell inflammation. So you can't hear your hormones telling you to burn that fat. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So sugar causes inflammation, bends an antenna. Trans fats causes inflammation, bends an antenna. Toxins in our environment, like glyphosate, causes inflammation and bends an antenna. So there's many more than that. We're just touching the surface of this, but these are the things that you can control. You can choose organic. You can choose no grains. You can choose no trans fats. That's up to you and the fork you're putting in your mouth, right? So you can make that decision. Just by making those little switches, people tell me all the time, I can't believe I started dropping the pounds. All I did was change 3 little things. Right? And those 3 little things make huge shifts in your metabolism. Now, the other thing that cortisol does is we all know we have a gland in our throat that controls our metabolism and fat burning called our thyroid gland.
Yeah.
Right? And your thyroid hormone controls how well your cells are going to burn up that fuel. Mm-hmm. So the sugar comes in, and if you don't metabolize it or burn it up in the engine, it gets stored as fat. So we want lots of good metabolism with the engine spinning. Yeah. Your thyroid hormone controls that. Okay? Now, cortisol wraps up your thyroid hormone and makes it impossible for your cell to use it. So the higher your stress level, the more cortisol you have, the less thyroid hormone you can use.
Interesting.
All right? But that hormone is still in your bloodstream, right? You just can't use it. But since it's still in your bloodstream, your brain goes, oh, I have plenty of thyroid hormone. I'm going to tell the thyroid to shut down. You don't need to make any more. So you become hypothyroid. All right? Again, hypothyroidism can be caused by 27 different things. One of the biggest ones is cortisol. Too stressed, too long. And if you have hypothyroidism, that belly fat is going to expand to overall fat. Your arms are going to start to get heavy. Your neck's going to start to get fat because it affects fat storage over your entire body.
So if we need to reduce cortisol, what are some ways to reduce the stress?
Okay. I can tell you the most effective way I've found across the board, turn off your TV.
I've done that.
Right? I don't watch the news
anymore.
Right? I mean, all it is the bad news. Mm-hmm. I like John Krasinski's the Good News. You ever watch that on YouTube? Hilarious. It's fantastic. SGN, some good news. Watch that.
Yeah, I will. Right? I will. No, I've done that. I stopped watching them months ago.
Yeah. You know, and some people say, oh, you're putting your head in the sand. It's like, oh, am I really? I think I'm saving my life.
Yeah, that's how I felt.
Right?
I'm like,
if something's big enough, I'm going to hear about it.
Yeah.
I don't need to watch the numbers on TV every day. Right? So that's rule number 1. Yeah. Rule number 2, cut the sugar out of your diet. Mm-hmm. It drives up your cortisol.
Okay.
Right? Follow all the tips we just said. They all drive up cortisol if you're driving up your sugar. Mm-hmm. Okay? The third thing you can do is get better sleep. Your adrenal glands, which make your cortisol, require good restorative sleep to function normally, but it's a catch-22. If cortisol goes up too high, it lowers melatonin. If you lower melatonin, you can't fall asleep. And the most common sign I see of that is you go to bed, but then you always wake up between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. And that has to do with a circadian rhythm cycle. That means your cortisol is too high and it's kicking you up out of your sleep cycle, and there's not enough melatonin to balance it. And then typically, too, when you wake up between 1 and 3, you have to go pee. And that's another indication of high cortisol. So,
out, yeah.
Right? And when your cortisol is too high, it makes you have to urinate.
Interesting.
Right? So if you came around the corner and there was a tiger, what's the first thing you do? Pee your pants. Right? And that's actually called dump syndrome. Your body's trying to make itself lighter and produce, this is nature, right? When animals don't like each other, they pee. Because here's my scent and it's pungent, don't come near me. Right? So that's a stress survival response in the deepest part of the limbic portions of your brain that says if you're under high stress, pee.
Okay.
All right? And don't go to sleep. Not a good time to go to sleep. Right?
There's a tiger.
Right. Okay. And then if your cortisol stays too high, too long, do you think if you're running from a tiger, it's a good time to stop and look at somebody you think is sexy? No. So your sex hormones get screwed up. Right? So if your cortisol is too high, your sex hormones get driven down.
Funny.
Your metabolism gets screwed up.
Yeah.
Your sugar metabolism gets screwed up. Everything gets screwed up. Right?
Yeah.
And there are certain herbs that really help with balancing your adrenal glands, like ashwagandha.
Yes.
Okay? And you can get that in a liquid tincture form, and that can help shut your stress down. CBD is phenomenal. Okay? Great at reducing your stress and anxiety levels very, very effectively. You have CB receptors throughout your entire body. It's something called the endocannabinoid system. It works intimately with your immune system and your hormone system. So if your endocannabinoid system is out of whack, your hormones will be out of whack, and your immune system will be out of whack.
Well, I know a lot of my friends have difficulty going to sleep and staying asleep, and they're buying melatonin, they're buying and they're frustrated because their sleep cycle has been so disrupted for so long, and they're just not getting sleep, and then it affects their diet. They're hungrier. There's all sorts of things happen when you can't sleep. So
it messes you up big time because that's when your body is doing your repair and regeneration, and doing the majority of your immune function. Okay, so if you don't sleep well, you're going to end up in trouble. So CBD mixed with melatonin can be very, very helpful. And there are some great formulas out there, right? Can I give a plug to one of my favorite places? Yeah. So online, it's a local Richmond shop called Mamie's Apothecary, right down in right?
Yeah.
And they're available online as well. They have some excellent formulas for that.
Hi, Lisa.
Right?
And she has an online store. So
yes, she does.
It doesn't matter where you are.
That's right.
You can order from her,
Right. So that's Mamie's Apothecary. Check it out. Great stuff. I send people there all the time. Right.
I don't have it on my ticker.
That's okay. They can Google it. They'll figure it out.
That's right.
Mamie's Apothecary in Richmond. And I'm only shouting them out because I know the quality of what they sell.
Yes.
Not all CBD is created equal. Not all formulations are put together properly. Some are way too high in melatonin. If you take too much, you throw the cycle completely in a reverse spin. Okay. And you have a negative effect. Ideally, you really don't want more than 3 to 5 milligrams. Okay? And CBD, again, really not created equal. It has to be grown preferably organically, has to be a certain spectrographic analysis for content, different strengths for different purposes. And I teach classes on CBD, so that's a whole other topic we can cover.
You do?
So, yeah.
Oh, yeah, we have a lot to talk about.
So
we just have to get the belly fat off tonight. And, I have
just start with all that.
Couple questions.
Because all that, like CBD, all that will actually help with the belly fat too, because you'll sleep better and you'll reduce inflammation.
Okay.
Okay. So give me a couple of questions.
So we talked earlier about hormones.
Yes.
So what I'm hearing from you is it really is an individualized situation because all of our hormones are different.
Correct.
We talked about mine earlier, and I'm sure mine are different from yours. And, so what can we do to identify what our hormone levels are so then we can actually put together a plan and a program to live healthier?
Well, that's an awesome question and a great question because, as you just mentioned, we are all biologically unique. We're all special, and we all get a medal because of it, right? So we're all biologically unique, and that means that there are things that are common to the human condition. However, our lifetime of experience and exposure has changed our biology. So we're all born with a genetic blueprint called our DNA, and that's all it is a blueprint. What gets built from that blueprint depends upon the foreman you hire, the workers you hire, and the materials they use.
Okay.
Right? You end up with a very different structure in the end.
Yeah.
Okay? So building from that blueprint is called epigenetics. And epigenetics means what is above the gene, what's more important than the gene, and that is how the gene gets expressed or turned on and turned off. And that depends on many different factors. So your epigenetics play a role in your hormone balance. The bacteria in your gut plays a huge role in your hormone balance. So we're all unique. So the way you would determine that is with testing. And through my practice, I help people around the country with this. So we do testing about all the things we talked about tonight, because if you don't have a target to hit and you can't see that target very clearly, you're never going to hit it, right? So you have to know where you're at, and you have to know what your finish line is so you can determine how to get from here to there.
Right.
So we do baseline testing to find out what our hormone levels are, including those hormones in the brain called neurotransmitters. That's done through urinalysis and saliva.
Yeah.
We do testing to look at your cell inflammation levels to see if those antennae can even hear those hormones. Mm-hmm. That's a finger prick blood test you can even do at home. We mail you a test kit, right? That finger prick blood test is $99. It doesn't get any better than that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm telling you, that is extremely inexpensive to give you some of the most important information anyone could get.
Yeah,
Right?
I have my kits here. So I think when you come back next month, we should read them. I'm fine
Yeah.
with it. Like, I don't
Right.
care.
So you have
we
to
can
do-
do
you have
it
to
right here.
actually-
And people can see what my hormone levels are. I don't know.
That'd be a great way to do it, right?
Right?
So
Yeah.
keep in mind that once we do these tests, it takes anywhere between 2 and 6 weeks to get the results back, depending on which test we're doing.
Okay.
Okay? Because some things take a while to culture. So these are specialty labs I use, so these kits are getting shipped around the country.
Okay.
For that, this is not something LabCorp is going to do, or Quest. Okay? This is very high-end, advanced diagnostics.
Right. Right.
Okay? And the reason for that is they give you high-end information that's actionable, that you can make changes with that change your life very rapidly.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. I mean, this is life changing because you're gonna learn what's going on in your body now, and then from there you'll have a plan to live healthier because you're
Right.
actually gonna understand the blueprint because we're all
Exactly
different.
right.
But
that's
in the
exactly-
meantime, we can make diet changes that are going to reduce inflammation. And what a great start.
Mm-hmm.
Get rid of some of this chunky monkey around our waist. And I will say too, I know we have so much to talk about. We're not going to get through. I'm going to talk about chair diet. There's so much I'm going to talk about. But I will say, since I started the keto portion, I have more energy. I really, I'm just, when you were talking about the mental clarity, I was like, absolutely. I just feel so much better. And, the first couple of days I felt a little pokey.
Yep.
But then after that, I just, it's very, I feel very different.
Right. And the same thing happens with intermittent fasting. The first few days, your body doesn't like it because it's different.
Yeah.
Right? But if you get to day 3 or 4, you're good.
Yeah. Like I said, food isn't, well, it's not too exciting for me anyway, because I'm kind of limited to what I can eat. But,
Right.
it's just, I highly recommend it to people. If you can just get through the first couple of days, it's really wonderful. You'll feel so much better for sure.
It is. And I'd be happy to, one of the things I offer is a free phone consult to anyone who wants to pick my brain for 15 minutes. So I'd be happy to offer that to anyone who's listening or watching tonight. Simply go to my website, drwildcanhelp.com.
And
you
it's
see on
right
the
along
ticker
the
there.
ticker? Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. And the first thing you'll see there when you go to the website is a free phone consult. Just click on that, schedule that, and you'll get an opportunity to ask me whatever you want to ask me. and I can guide you through that. And on my website too, if you do want to do any specialized testing to find out where you're at and how to fix you, I can direct you towards what's appropriate for that. And the one more thing that we had mentioned before when we started, we were talking about the book that I wrote, which is called The Holistic Handbook for Optimal Health. And that book is completely sold out of all the hard copies, but I have electronic versions available. And I'd be happy to offer a complimentary copy to anyone who tunes into this podcast. So you just ask me about that when you call me, and I'll give you a download link for that. It's about 225 pages long, so we're not talking about a little booklet, okay? But we get into details about how to balance your life most efficiently through nutrition, supplementation, exercise, things that are shown over millennium to work. And we put that in a current context.
And I have to say that just with my own experience prior to meeting you, and most people that do know me know that I exercise quite a bit, and I feel like I've always felt like I had a good diet. Pescatarian, salads and veggie burgers and all this stuff. And once I started reading the carbs in some of the food choices I was making, I started to realize why I was accumulating belly fat,
Right.
between the diet I had, which I thought was healthy, and the stress and the COVID and, all of that. I started to realize what was happening.
Right.
But I thought I was doing a good thing.
And I hear that all the time. People say, I eat right. And I say,
Yeah.
really? What's right for you?
Right.
We don't know that, because what's right for you is different than what's right for me and the next person. And the only way to really know that is through testing. And so we do testing of the gut microbiome to see who's living. What can they even digest?
Right.
Because who's living in your belly versus my belly, we can eat the same food and get completely different nutrients out of it with a completely different fat storage or fat burning profile. Right? So first we learn who lives there. We set up a diet for you based on what you can digest. And then we do food sensitivity testing to see what your immune system is reacting to. And then we get you on the best possible diet for you, maximizes your fat burning, balances your hormones, reduces your inflammation, and helps to prevent the development of all those chronic diseases we talked about at the beginning.
Dr. Wild, thank you.
It was my pleasure.
No, really. Thank you for being here. And I'll let our viewers know we have some exciting news. Dr. Wild is going to be with us every month on the V-Talks, the last Tuesday of every month, because we have so many things to talk about. But we're going to cover,
Yeah.
I know, right? We are going to, just talk about so many different topics that are affecting our health. And I'm grateful for you. This is definitely, I know, life-changing for me. And I know you're going to help so many people. So if you would like more information, if you'd like more information on testing, if you'd just like to pick up the phone and call this guy, he's so interesting, please go to his website on the ticker, drwildcanhelp.com. Did I get that right? I don't have my glasses, so I can't see very well.
Right there.
And check it out. I myself have ordered test kits. I am going to do them right here at home, and then we will all hear together what's going on with me. And hopefully by next time, maybe we'll have one test in by then. If not, the time after you come, we'll get it all straight. But yeah. So thank you.
No, thank you. I mean, I love an opportunity to talk anytime I can, because, again, I think this is probably the most important information that people don't know. Right. And that if you just change the tiniest little things and pay attention to what's really important, your health is in your hands. You're not a victim.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. And your story was amazing. Thank you for sharing. I know it wasn't easy, but you're a good guy, and this is your calling, and
Thank you.
All right. So I will see you next month.
Okay.
And you take care. I'm going to wrap it up since we're 30 minutes over, but we could have been
Yeah.
2 hours over. We could have
I
kept
know.
going. All right. You take care.
Thank you.
All
I
righty.
know.
Bye now. All right, everybody. I'm sorry we went over tonight, but it was just such an interesting topic. And I know Michael has so much to say about this. He's passionate about it, he's done the research. I'm excited about my testing too. But anyway, thank you for tuning in, and we'll have him back next month. And you can always message me if there's some topics that you'd like for us to cover. So it's nice to have him on every month. And then we have our show next Tuesday. So this is a lot of fun. We have Michael Rock and Maddie Levine from Fun 107, our local radio station. And they're going to be in the hot seat for a change because they're usually the ones interviewing people, but I'm going to interview them. So we're going to hear what they're up to over at the station. And so we're really excited about that. And then the following week, we have the Darbies, and they are going to be here. They are a rock band from Los Angeles, and they've toured with LA Guns and some other big names, and they're going to be here. They're a lot of fun. Can't wait to have them. And of course, we have our monthly visit with Andrew Aaron, the relationship therapist, and he will be back on as well. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for tuning in. And I hope you guys have a good evening. Bye.